Hello and welcome back to this video number 6 on identity access management. And as we have discussed on the video 1 when we started this series, that video 6 would cover the identity governance, and I am also hopeful that you had the opportunity to watch the other videos, especially the video number 5 where we have worked on the RBAC or role-based access control, right? So this is in continuation of that, and let's just dive into this presentation and see what are the topics that we're going to cover. So basically this topic would revolve around primarily around two areas. One would be the privilege identity management, referred as PIM, as most of you are already familiar with it. And then we will dive into the entitlement management, which is going to revolve around access packages, or referred as self-service RBAC 2. These two areas are very prominent, and when we start talking about PIM, we also need to differentiate between Azure Active Directory rules and Azure resource rules here, which we have substantially elaborated in our last video. Now we would run the PIM against both types of roles here. Now, as soon as we walk into privilege identity management or access packages, the one thing that pops up in my mind is the zero trust architecture. Though we briefly touched it in our earlier videos, but when we talk about identity governance, one of the key area for consideration should be the least privilege model and verify explicitly, right? So these are the two areas that this particular identity governance would actually revolve around. And to be precise, it would take the advantage of both just enough administration or just enough access and just in-time administration, JIT. So this is the JIT and GIA are the core component of this identity governance, and we will see that how best we can leverage it. Microsoft has done a phenomenal job in this space, and it's very simple, easy, iterative to understand, and very effective way of helping build your zero trust architecture. I mean, it's not the full-blown zero trust architecture, but it helps you to address one of the major component of your zero trust architecture, right? So I'm not going to go in all the details of this zero trust architecture here. At one point I will probably come with another video for Microsoft zero trust architecture for Azure, but that is another video. Now with that, how should we proceed? I think the easiest way, as I mentioned, is to start with Privilege Identity Manager PIM demo. Please understand these terminologies sometimes could be confusing. Privilege Identity Manager is available to you in Azure with the right subscription, which helps you with just enough administration and just in-time administration. There is also Privilege Access Management, PAM or PAM, which generally works around on-prem Active Directory Red Forest solution. If you're interested in understanding that, I have a separate video on my YouTube channel for Privilege Access Management that you may watch. I created probably 3 years back, quite some time. And then there is also a concept of Privilege Access Workstation, or PAW, which also goes in alignment with the PAM solution, the Privilege Access Management solution, which is a Privilege Access Workstation, which is a recommended path to address to your security and compliance need. Obviously, I'm not going to talk about PAW or PAM in this particular presentation, but these are all related overlapping technologies and sometimes could be confusing. So PIM is in Azure, PAM is Privilege Access Management, which is being done in on-prem Red Forest environment kind of a solution, and then Privilege Access Workstation. Azure also offer you something very similar to Privilege Access Workstation called as an Azure Managed Workstation, which is also one of the recommendation from me to be used for all your privilege activities. Right? That's a separate topic, separate discussion. We'll talk sometime in another video. Now, just jumping into this demo for Privilege Identity Manager, which hopefully would help you and which will align with the authorization video that we have done prior to this. I think that was video number 4. So it would, the thought process, the mindset, that the concept that you have understood in that video would be carried forward into this video, video number 5, for identity governance. So let's just get into the lab. So I am at my Azure Active Directory, Azure portal, and I am in my Azure Active Directory. If you see here, if you go to the Azure Active Directory, you will see the identity governance. This is the topic for this video, and let's just get there and see what does Microsoft has to offer. So 2 different areas here in this identity governance, which is what we will be covering. One is the Privileged Identity Management, PIM, and the second is Entitlement Management, which revolves primarily around access package. This is more of a self-service RBAC model, so we'll cover both of them in this scenario, right? So you could start from here, or we could actually go from Azure AD Privileged Identity Management, right? So before we start this, obviously there is some licensing requirement. It requires a Azure Active Directory P2, which we have talked in video 1. So if you need to know more details, you can go to the video 1, and you have the whole table there for SKUs perspective and the feature sets perspective. So you will find that information there. As long as you have the P2 licenses, you're good to go and use Azure Active Privileged Identity Management. And before we do that, we have got to do something prerequisites here in terms to allow the users to use the Privileged Identity Management, right? So basically, when we talk about Privileged Identity Management in Azure, it would be divided into 2 separate areas, or the scope would be either Azure Active Directory roles, or either there could be the Azure resource roles, right? The Azure Resource RBAC or Azure AD RBAC. That's what we discussed in our last video, video 4, right? So this is getting forward from there. So we have to cover both of them. Now, as you also know that in Azure Resources, to allow a RBAC model, you should have the ownership right on that particular resource, or resource administration right? Until unless you have that rights, you cannot do that. Or alternatively, you should have a user access administrator rights on the resources where you want to allow PIM to operate, right? So those are the prerequisites. So we'll see how does that reflect here, and how do you do the best practices here. And let's make sure first of all we start enabling the Privileged Identity Management. So before your users can start using the Privileged Identity Management, you need to onboard your subscriptions and management group for Privileged Identity Management. And one of the core requirements for that would be that only the owners of the subscription or the management groups can onboard that subscription or management group into the Privileged Identity Management scope, right? That's the first task. So how do we do that? So if I'm logged in here as admin, which is the global admin, right? And this is the default account. And if I go to the Azure Resources here, I have already done that, but I will show you. If you go to the Discover Resources here, this is where you will find subscriptions and other stuff, right? Right now it's showing unmanaged. If I say all, and I can say all, then it will give me what is managed and what is not managed, right? So management type is direct, subscription is managed. If you do not see a subscription or management group here, then this was onboarded on December 1st, 2020 to 34. So you see a vendors, and now it shows the management groups too, right? And it has been, I just onboarded them this morning, right? So as long as you have the rights, you have to do that. And that's number 1. Number 2 is, in fact, in order to start using the Azure Active Directory roles, you don't have to do anything extra. But in order to do the Azure Resource role or Azure Resource RBAC, you need to make sure, as I mentioned, that the required users that would be managing your PIM has the ability to at least the ownership right or the user access administrator right. So what we will do here in my environment, if I click here now, so if I go here on subscriptions, Let me do slightly differently here and see if it works. So after we have onboarded the subscriptions or the management group for the PIM, the next task, important task, is to find out judiciously which are the users that would be required to manage your PIM on your environment. Remember that this is a very important task and relates to a lot of security stuff. So we need to find out as an organization who would be the right candidates for managing your PIM. And once you have identified them, then you also need to identify, depending on your organizational structure and your tenant structure, that which group of users needs to be given permissions at what layer. Because as you remember that they need the rights to assign Azure roles. They have the rights to do in Azure Active Directory, but for Azure resources, they would need to be given rights. So for an example, if I have got 4 different management groups, and they need to be managed differently by different teams, so we can assign 4 different set of users to do the PIM part of it, right? Or we have 4 subscriptions. Each subscription is meant for different purposes, but I don't want that my subscription 1 PIM administrator should be managing the subscription 2 PIM administration. So that kind of a granularity you have to keep in mind when you design and architect it. In my lab environment, I have only 1 subscription, so pretty much I don't have much options here to show you all that. But what I would do here, in order to make it more efficient work and architect it properly, I have created a group. Let's go here in a group. This is an Azure Active Directory group, not an on-prem group. This is important to remember, that this is an Azure AD group. This is not your synced group that we have discussed in our video 2 and video 3, right? So this is a cloud group that we created. I created this group called as an AT365 TST PIM. So this is my PIM group, because I have only 1 subscription, so I'm okay with 1 subscription, and I only have 1 management group, so I'm fine. If I would have more than 1 subscription and more than one management group to be managed by different teams, then I would have multiple of these groups created, right? And look here, this is important to understand. This is the feature that I mentioned in our video 4 for authorization. If you see here, the properties of this group, right? This is the group, and who is the member right now? There's only one guy, who is Bobby Malik, who I think is the right candidate to manage this environment. Now, if I go to the properties of this is very important, that when you create this group, you have to choose this, right? And once you choose this, you cannot go back. It's just one time. You cannot change it back to no now, right? It's done. You cannot do that. You cannot click it here. It's done. It cannot be changed. So this group can be assigned to Azure AD roles, and that's what we are going to do. So we have this group AT365 TST PIM that is going to manage my PIM in this environment. And the disadvantage of this is, if you want to go with this analogy, that if somebody has the rights to manage the groups, they can modify the membership of this group, and then these people get automatically the rights. So it is a double-edged sword, whether you want to go this route or you want to go with individual identities, right? I'm gonna show you both here. This is a group-based assignment, which may work, but you need to make sure that your group administration is controlled correctly, so that they cannot modify the membership of this group. Any help desk people or anybody that you could give the user administrator role in Azure Active Directory, or anybody else who has the global admin rights, obviously they can modify the membership of this group, and that could be tricky, right? So it's good or it's bad, right? So it's up to us how we want to use it. Or we could just use a regular ID or IDs to add them to the PIM. Now, what my point here is that once we have identified whether you're going to use a group or whether you're going to use individual user identities, the next task is to allow, especially for Azure, to go to your resource layer, whether you want this PIM to be managed at the management group layer or a subscription layer, or at a resource group layer. You can have all that kind of a granularity there. So in my scenario, I'm doing at the subscription layer, but you have the choices to control wherever you want to give this set of users or this group or the users that you plan the rights. So what I did here on my subscriptions, on my subscription here, if I show you, and this is what we discussed in our authorization window, video, right? So what we have here is this particular group that we created. We have given this group a user access administrator rights without giving the ownership right. Now this will allow them, without giving the ownership rights, to assign the roles effectively, right? And that's what we did. Okay, so now because he has that, this group has that right, and there is an app, MS PIM app, that is automatically granted access to the entire tenant once once you enable the PIM part, right? This is the PIM application. Now because this group or this individual, this could be a group, this could be an individual. The another important thing that we are doing here is that once we go to the assignment to the privilege roles, so what we need to do, we need to assign that privilege admin role, right? So we go here and then we need to assign that role. Now you could directly assign this role here, and that could be one way of doing it, but as I mentioned in my last video, that my preference would be, and the preferred route is, that any role that you have here should always be managed by the privilege identity management. So I'm not going to directly assign a role to a group or user, right? I'm not going to do the direct assignment. I'm going to do through the regular PIM process, because I have the rights as me to use the privilege administration. So the way I would like to do it here is, or I have done it here, is that I have gone to the privilege identity management, and then I have gone to the Azure AD roles, and then I have done the assignments here, right? And in that case, this is an eligible assignment. That means it's not active all the time, and it's eligible not permanently. It is eligible between this time period. So I'm very specific that this group will be, and if I like, I need to extend it afterward, I can extend it, or I can remove it, or I can update it, right? So if you see here, this is what it is: eligible, permanently eligible, not there. Now what the difference between eligible and active means, that if I could have created this an active, which is what you're going to see in 1 second, then it is always active, and then it loses the our basic principle of just in-time administration, because if that role is always active, then why do we need to do that, right? That's the point. So in certain cases you might need to do that active all the time, but in most scenario I would prefer to go with eligible option, not the active option. And I hope that it's not making much sense to you, but once you see it, then it will make sense, right? So now this particular user is this particular user is assigned the role here through the PIM process, right? And that whole group is assigned. That means Bobby, who is a member of this group, is having the privilege identity management role. Now let's see how does it work, right? So if I log in back here as Bobby, and if I can go there, so now I am logged in as Bobby, and I am on my privilege identity management. And the difference between eligible and active you will see shortly, which is what we discussed. If I go into my roles here, I have got my eligible assignment is privilege role administrator, right? Now I should probably sign off to show you the full picture here, because then it will activate the MFA part. All these privilege roles, which we will be covering in the second video, that we will be talking in the video number 6 in the security part. At that time we will be talking more about the requirements and security. But all these privilege roles that you have in Azure Active Directory roles, whenever you activate them, it should enforce MFA, and that's what I'm showing you here, because that's important. So if we, if I log in back here as Bobby, and I am on my privilege identity management, and the difference between eligible and active you will see shortly, which is what we discussed. If I go into my roles here, I have got my eligible assignment is privilege role administrator, right? Now I am logged in as Bobby, and I am on my privilege identity management. And the difference between eligible and active you will see shortly, which is what we discussed. If I log in back here as Bobby, and I am on my privilege identity management, and the difference between eligible and active you will see shortly, which is what we discussed. right? So now because I have this turned on already set up, this is by default. If I do not approve it through the MFA, we are being cautious here and providing additional security before you activate any privileged roles. And now I am in. So if I go to my roles, oh, I just logged in, I'm sorry. Now I have to activate and it should ask me for MFA. The privilege role administrator is there, but it's not activated yet. So I have to activate this role. And now it is sending me an MFA request back again because I'm activating the first time when I was doing it, it was just doing it that, and then it's asking me for MFA, right? Starting at this time, or you could choose your time whenever you want to start this and activate this role. And instead of 8 hours, I can do possibly 2 hours or 1.5 hours or 2 hours. So that gives the concept of just in time administration. After this time, this role would expire, and this particular user would not have those privileged rights to do anything in the environment. Makes your environment more secure and safe, right? And it is all audited in the background, so you have an audit trail, and I can activate it now. In past, till about I think 6-7 months back, you would have to log off and log back to take the take the effect of the activation. Now Microsoft has done it automatically, so it will refresh it in 4 seconds and you don't have to log off and you are good to go. Right, now I am in. So now I am in a capacity of using and taking the privileges of being a privileged identity management administrator. That means I can assign roles to the different team members or different users in my environment. I'm not going to go into that authorization model that we discussed in the last video, but let's just start with an Azure AD role, right? And here, let's say I want to give one of my user my requirement is that he should be managing the users and groups and access packages in my environment, right? So the role that fits for that purpose is for the minimalistic permission and least privilege model would be the user administrator, right? So I can go either assignment or roles. It works both ways. So if I go to assignments, I can add it. Let's see here, roles, and then I can pick up the user administrator, and then I can go and add assignment either way, this way, or the other way around is I go to assignment and I add assignment, and then it will ask me to pick up the role here. Both ways it should be doable, right? So if I go here, oops, user administrator, either way, and the scope is directory, no member is selected. Now you can select, for an example, Chris here, and Chris White. Okay, Chris is fine. And this is where you would understand the difference between eligible, active, permanent, right? So if I go next here, now you have got assignment types, which is what I was mentioning earlier. I was probably ahead in the game. When we say assignment type, you have eligible and active, and you can click here, right? Select assignment type. Eligible means that, obviously, as the name explains, self-explanatory, you are making them eligible and they have to activate the role, like I showed you in a few minutes back, right? That is what, and they can activate only for maximum for 8 hours in a day. You can fix that, put the time there, and you can go maximum 8 hours. So that gives you the ability of just in-time administration. You could do permanently, or you could be for a specific time period, depending on what the use case is. If it's a, I would always probably go with a specific time and instead of permanently eligible it, and if I need to extend it, I can extend it down the road, but or if you are comfortable doing permanently eligible, you can definitely do that. So for an example, I can say eligible, and I will do two use cases here separately so you understand that. So 12, and I will say I will only go up to 1 month here, right? So that's it. And I say eligible, right? So now what I'm saying him, I'm giving him a user administrator role and I assign it. Okay. Now I would also do the same thing for Chris White. One more thing on Azure resource, right? Now we have already onboarded the environment. This Chris White unfortunately does not have the rights um, to on the subscription here. So for an example, the Bobby has the rights um, on the subscription, but Chris White does not have the rights as of now anywhere. Now the Chris White needs to be given rights on a particular resource group, for an example, right? So what I can do here is I can go to Azure resources. Now the first part was assigning the Azure Active Directory role, which I think you have a clear cut understanding now after going into video 4. That's why these are in a sequence, right? And that's what I'm asking you. If you have not watched the earlier videos, you do watch those videos. Now if you have already understood that Azure AD role is assigned, now I need to assign him a Azure resource role. So I have the ability here. I can go to resource group, management group, right? So right now I'm planning to do the resource groups. So I can say, hey, on new subscription. Now you can do the same thing like I showed you last time. You can show assignment or you can show roles, either way, right? So I can go to the roles here and I want to give him a contributor right. Right? And I want to add an assignment now. No member selected, come on, yep. And then I pick up Chris again. Now I go next, and this time I will make it active, right? And I will make it active again for 1 month. Now you have to justify why you are making active. All right, so all good. Now let's see the impact of this, right? So I'm gonna go and open another incognito window and try to log in with Chris. Remember, this is a cloud only identity, right? We discussed it in video 2 and video 3. Oops. Alright, so he's good. By default, he has 0 rights into Azure Active Directory right now, right? But here is the kicker code, guys. Even if he does not have the rights on Azure Active Directory, he has the read rights here. So pretty much he can go ahead and read everything, which is still scary from security perspective, right? So how do we manage that? We need to talk about it. We need to discuss it in our security video, which is going to come next, right? So we'll discuss that. But he can see users. He can not create it. He cannot do anything. He would not be even allowed to create new guest users. But he can see that, right? He doesn't have the rights here. As far as the Azure resources are concerned, he has only rights to this subscription because I gave him a a right earlier, and if you see view here, he should have the rights because we have active here. We have activated that role, right? So he has the contributor rights and he has the owner rights because we gave him that rights automatically, right? This is not that he has to activate. This is already good to go. So let me show you what it means, right? So if I say here and Azure AD privilege management and my roles, so eligible as role, he has not yet activated it. He has to activate it, but the active assignment is on the Azure AD. He doesn't have it because he does not have to activate this role at all because he has been given that right permanently on that particular resource group, right? So he does not have to activate it. So we'll change it momentarily once we go there and we'll see what happens. So let's say first of all, what is his experience here with activation, right? Now additional validation required. This is what we're talking about because this is configured. This is a security requirement. He is activating a privilege role, and in order to do that, he has to authenticate second time with MFA. So he'll ask me to do this here. I have to use my phone, and always better to use a authenticator app versus a SMS or a voice, right? Because as per Microsoft latest recommendation, that is what we should be doing, because other options like SMS or text or phone is not as secure as you may want, right? So okay, I have to take that screenshot here, and I think I'm good to go, and I need to approve it. Cool. And this is exactly what we should be doing it, right? So now we are good in order to activate a privilege role. And now because he has activated his role, or he is still not, sorry. So now we say custom activation time start if you want to do a particular time, or I can leave it, and I can scroll it down to 1 hour and activate it. By field, managing users and groups. And he's good to go. Now if he goes back to Azure Active Directory and he goes to the users, my expectation is that he should be able to create new users, he should be able to create groups, he should be able to create access package, he should be able to modify the group membership only of the groups that are created in Azure Cloud. He should not be able to change the group membership of the synced group. Remember that we discussed that in our earlier videos, right? So all that is coming through together here because they are all all videos are interlinked, right? So I had broken down into 6 videos, but they all have interconnectivity and dependency on each other. So we are all good here, and he is now, if he goes into the resource group here, he does not have access to anything else in this environment, right? Except for this new resource group. And if he wants to do anything, he has a contributor right here, and that means, and he has contribute rights for the time period that we define. He does not have to activate anymore. That means he is now able to create any resources that he likes, whether he wants to create a VNet or VMs or Kubernetes services or clusters or storage. So he's good to go, right? And that is the beauty of this pin, right? So let's just change it for the time being and see if we change it from eligible to active on that resource, then what happens, right? So let me do that quickly. So what I want to do here is that I'm going to go to this back into as a Bobby because I'm a PIM administrator, and I can change that option for Chris. So I can go to Azure resources here, which was a resource new, which is where we gave the rights or assigned the role, and we can look into the active assignments here, and you see here Chris White has been given the rights here as he has been given the rights twice here. He has been given rights when I was testing as owner as well. So I'm going to remove it. So he has no more owner rights on that one. Now, Chris White, we have given them an active option, right? An assignment was active. So we want to change it from active to eligible now, right? That's what we want to do. And the assignment ends on 12/02. Let's change it to 01 and save it. So hopefully now once we have done that, and once we go back to the Chris, he should not have the rights by default on that resource group, right? And we'll see it in a minute. So I have logged in back as at Chris, and you see because he has no active assigned roles here, he don't even see anything in Azure resources, right? If I go home, he doesn't see anything. If I go resource groups, he would not see anything, right? Don't have a subscription because he has no rights here. But if he goes to the privilege identity management and to look for my roles and say active assignments here, so he has a user administrator that is assigned, eligible assignments, how he would activate, and Azure resources, here you go. So if you see here, he has the contributor right, he has yet not activated. If you go to the Azure resources, these are the eligible assignments for him, no active assignments anymore. And if you go here, he activates it, it's validating the request, and I would say custom here, starting at 12:02, that's fine. And I would say, hey, I need 1 hour, and I need to create a VM. Now also users have to be advised when you start going into this model and educated that, hey, activate this your role for a minimal possible time. Though you have the ability to activate it for 8 hours, rather not do it 8 hours. So if you think that you can do this work in 2 hours, just take it for 2 hours, right? So they should be educated, and they should understand the implication of that by doing that they're helping the organization overall security posture. So that's always good to tell and educate the consumer of your services in Azure, right? Hopefully it should refresh shortly, and once it does, then we will see whether he has the rights in the resource group. All right, so he's good. Now if he wants to go back to resource group, he should see his resource group that he has been assigned right to the privilege, and he now can create a VM or storage or whatever he wants to do that. So that's what is so you would also be able to see the audit history here of what you did and how you did, and you have a paper trail on the activities that you have been doing it, right? And you can also add the ticket number and all that if you want to customize it a little bit better. Now, not only that, if you go to Azure AD roles, let's go back here and go to Azure AD roles, you would also see my audit, resource audit, and you would also see alerts here. So right now, roles, you see here, roles do not require multi-factor authentication for activation. So there are three counts, which is medium right now, and let's see which are those three source roles. That is, application developer and global reader has not been enabled for MFA when you activate them. So we should turn it on, and we'll discuss that once we get to the security one, right? And you will see all the details here: pending requests, approved requests, review access, assignments that you have done, whatever the assignments are, right? So the alerts you already did, access reviews, we are going to just do it shortly once we start looking into the access package. Resource audit, you can pick up a member number and see, or do an export and pick up, search by a member or trace or whosoever you assign the roles. So you have all the information at your fingertips. So pretty impressive work that Microsoft has done here in my viewpoint. And we will be jumping shortly into the entitlement management, but let's just try to summarize what we have done so far, especially with the PIM. So number one point that I would think is that PIM, to activate PIM, you need P2 licenses, one way or the other, right? So we established that. Number two is that before you start leveraging PIM, you have to onboard your subscriptions or management, and in order to do that, you have to have the ownership right on the subscription or management that you want to onboard. Once you have onboarded the subscription or the management group, then you can manage that subscription or management group through PIM, right? Azure Active Directory role, you have no additional task to do. You just activate the PIM and then you are good to go. The third thing that you also have to do in order to manage the PIM is that you have to add the right users or right groups. This is the decision that you have to make into the PIM administration role, right? That's what we showed you. Now, instead of directly adding or assigning the PIM administration role to the user or a group, I have recommended that to be done through the PIM process itself, so that you can do this the right way. And in that case, always try to enable it permanently. Do it for a specific time period. Also, make sure that you try to not make it active and keep it as eligible, so that users would require to activate the role whenever they need to, and that would allow you to use the just-in-time administration more efficiently, right? That's another thing. Now, in order for you or the PIM administrator to assign Azure resource role, you also have to assign that particular user or a group the required rights on that particular resource, right? Whether it's a subscription, management, or resource group, wherever you are trying to do that. And the easiest way to do is, instead of giving them the ownership right, I give them the user access administrator right on that particular resource, whether subscription, management, and you're good to go, right? And then you also have the option to see all your alerts. You can also have the audit trail here. You can export the information. You can also track what happened and how happened and who did what access. So you have a proper auditing trail, which also makes it significantly important, right? So that's all what I think we need to know about PIM. More you use it, more you would love it, and more you would like it, right? So now let's moving on to the next topic of this video, which would be the entitlement management, right? So let's go there. And as I said, it starts with access package. So let's just understand the concept before we start working on it. So basically what it does, for the lack of better words, it allows you to have a self-service RBAC model, right? Instead of you doing it, users can request the access automatically, and you could review it and you could do it. So fundamentally what will happen here is that you would have assigned the right groups to the right resources, right? For an example, I think we did that. If we can go back and look here, we have already did it in our last video on the test resource group. We have created 3 different groups, and those are empty groups right now, and we have given them the rights, right? So if you look here, the test owner has been given the ownership right on this particular resource group. test contributor has been given the contributor right, and test read has been given the read right. So let's assume that you have already done the work before you go to the access package. And I would say that your access package would only come in picture when you have defined your proper RBAC model and you have already configured all this, like we have pre-configured this RBAC. We have got 3 different groups with 3 different roles assigned to this resource group. Now the beauty here is that this could be automated in terms of who gets, because right now the test owner or test contributor or test read are empty, right? So let's quickly look into these groups. Are empty, they have 0 membership. Excuse me. So members, no members, right? See, this is the case. We did it in our last video, if you remember. I'm not going to do all of them, but there's 0 membership right now. So what would happen with the access package is that we will publish these groups on the access portal, access.microsoft.com portal. And these role groups have already been assigned the roles, and the users can come and request, hey, I need access contributor rights on this resource group. And it will go through your approval process, built-in solution, ready solution for you, nothing to be done. It's straightforward. And once it is approved, the users would be added into this test contributor group for the time period that you define in your access package, and they get access to without actually worrying about and somebody coming in and assigning that role, right? So that's pretty cool actually. So if we understood the concept, let's try to do this now. Now, in order to do that, in order to manage these access packages, obviously the global administrator can do that. And the second role that can also create access packages and manage access packages is the user administrator role. So if I have the Chris here, if I believe I have logged in Chris here, and if he has activated his role, he should be able to create access packages actually, because he has the user administrator rights that we gave him, right? And I'm not sure whether he's activated, right? Active assignments. Okay, he's active, right? So if he goes back here, and I'm pretty sure he should be able to do that. If you go to identity governance, and he can create an access package, right? Now he can create an access package, new access package, and we will name it as demo. Now the catalogs, you could start creating your own catalog here, right? So you could be general, or you could say, I'm going to create a new catalog for my company, and then depending on that, it becomes easier here. So I'm just calling it demo for the time being, but you can have your own naming convention here, and you start defining it. And when you can say enable for external users. This is the option, self-explanatory. I'm going to leave it the way it is, and I'm creating that. So the catalog is now created, right? Now, very intuitive actually, it's very straightforward. It looks very difficult. Now, what you need to do, you can do for groups and teams, applications, or SharePoint sites. Pretty impressive. I'm only going to do groups from Azure perspective. So I'm going to say here, groups, and then you can select the groups and see all the groups. And now you will see the group here. Let's say I'm doing the test owner for the time being. Select. Right. Test owner is good. Now the role that you have is member here, right? We're not just finding the role, we are just making him the member of this group, right? Next quest for your users in your directory, we will say for users in your directory. Specific users and group, all members, all users including guests. So depending on how you want to do that, I'm doing this here. Require approval, yes or no? Yes. How many guest stages? Manager approval here, and then you have to add a user that has to approve it, right? And right? I have a supervisor that has to approve it. Decision must be made in how many days to approve it. You can set the days. I'm leaving 14. You can decide however you want to do that. Require approval justification, yes or no. You can do that. I'm just gonna say yes to explain it. Enable new requests and assignments, yes. And the request, we are not doing this. This is in the preview mode. Request a question here. You can do that, but I'm just skipping it for the time being. Now, number of days. On date, never, number of days, right? So 365 days is too much for me. I'm gonna do only for 30 days for an example. Depending on how your organization is, let's say you have a contractor environment and you need to give him 90 days. So choose the right time for you, because longer you give it, the challenge is this, right? So now if you say require access reviews, which is what we want, we will say no here, but you could always say that access reviews are required, right? And now I can create it. So now users, for an example, if I don't remember my users here, I think I have Ron Temsky here. For example, Ron Temsky needs an access, a contributor rights to this environment, right? To this particular resource group, the test one. So what he would be doing here is, I have too many windows open. I'm going to close many of them here now. And I'm going to open another incognito window. And so I have logged in as Ron Temsky here, right? And I log into myaccess.microsoft.com and see the package, the access package that you have published is now available for him, and he can say demo access and he can request access here, right? And he knows that what is the request here, test owner, and he can request access to that. You can say specific period. Right now it's no. It's gonna do by automatically to 90 days. Your request is being processed, and it's gonna go through the approval process. And once it is done, we're good to go, right? So this is good. Now we'll see back into and approve it. So once the user has requested, you will receive an email for approval or deny. And Ron Temsky has requested, I can as an approve it. You definitely need an email address for that to see the approval request. And I can approve it, or you can go to the portal as you, if you don't want to go to the email. And I should be able to approve it. So either way, you could either sign on your email, or you can sign in yourself as an approver to my access portal and approve it. And that's how this guy, the Ron Temsky, should have the access to that the resource group, right? So let's see that how does it actually reflect. If I can open here, would log in as Ron Temske now. And he see his resource group, he should have the ownership right. That's what he requested. And we can check it, view my access. And he's the owner, right? And he's the owner for 30 days because that's what we have set the policy there, and he's good to go. So that explains to you how does the access package works, right? So as I mentioned earlier, by approving that request, what should have happened is that the runtime scale should have been added automatically through that access package flow to the test owner group. So we can double check it here. And if you see this test owner group in the Ron Temske is a member, but he's a member for a specific duration, and it would be removed after that time, right? 30 days time, following the just in time philosophy of our least privilege model, right? This is where it actually does. And also, if you go back into the identity governance, you can see the details here too, right? So let's see. And now we can go to the access packages. You will see the catalog that you created. You can see what you have in the catalog if you want to do that, right? So that should give you the access packages here, whatever the access packages is, roles and administration, that you could define here as an owner, as a reader, to give you an additional role-based access control just for this particular catalog, right? That's also important. Now if you see the access package here, I have the demo access, and it goes into the resource roles, whatever we have published in this. We have the test owner, which we have published here. The policies is the initial policy that we have. Assignments, Ron Temske has been approved, delivered here, right? Until you approve it, it will be pending here for approval. And the request here, you will see the request. I canceled one request initially, then I created another request, and it has delivered, right? So pretty cool stuff. And that takes care of the access packages portion and the self-governance RBAC model. Hope you understand that. Also, one more thing, that when you created the access package here, you have the option to add a member, or you could also make that particular the requesting user an owner of that group. I probably would not do that. Owner of that group means that now that user would have the ability to add members to that group, which in my viewpoint I will not do it. Maybe there are some use cases, but I would generally say, hey, I created it, now anybody can come and request the membership here. So pretty much if you say he becomes the owner of that, then he has the liberty to add the required users and identity into that group, and then you lose the control and that particular guy. So it's a much more granular lower layer administration. You give him the keys of the kingdom to whatever level you want to do that, and that particular user manages that portion of it. So both of the options are available to you depending on how you want to manage and how you want to operate it. All right, a lot of information to digest, I know. There's one more last piece of this video around access packages that I thought I should share with you, and I did it while I was working on it, but it's good to know that there is one more option here that I created. Actually, two of them, test and external. What I did here is, so if you go in this route, you can create an external, if I go back here, sorry, let's go back here before that. Connected organizations, right? So what you could do, if you have some of your vendors, customers, or if you have a separate Active Directory tenant that you want that tenant to have access to your environment or entitlement, because this is entitlement management. if you want the users from that particular Active Directory tenant be able to access the services in your environment, then you definitely can do that. So I have added one of my another Azure Active Directory tenant, if you see here, as az.local, right? And this is this is what I added here. This is my another lab, and it's very simple to do that, right? Sponsors internal and external. Let me just go back here and show you one more time. So connected, and you go here and then you say define whatever the name of that is. This one example, we're not going to do that, but because we already did that, let's say here easy test, and then we go call it easy test here. Configured. Now you need to add the directory domain. So depending on what UPNs you're using here, so I was using, for an example, in that environment, I had a user external Azure AD directory by typing one of his domain names. So what I have there is aztest.club in that particular environment, and here it finds it, right? And you select it, and you select it and you continue doing it. It will ask for your internal and external responses, and you add it, right? So that's how I did it. And if you see here back into identity governance, we have added one of my another tenant. So if I can open dashboard here, I'll show you what I mean. Yep, here you go. So we basically added this AZ80 lab, if you see in there, and if you see the user's UPN here, the synced identity is aztest.club. So anybody from this Active Directory, these guys can go and request access, right? So now once I did that, after that what I did is I went into that and I created another access package. Oops, sorry. Access package, and I created this one test. And in this, if you see here the resource roles, I have configured my SharePoint site, and this SharePoint site, and I've allowed that as all company visitors here, right? So if you see the policies here, and this is the initial policy that we did, and I have added them. So if you do that, these users would be added as an all company visitor role into the SharePoint site. And I have made a request actually earlier. This guy, this is from that environment. This is this user here, right? This guy has been given access to the SharePoint in my tenant, right? Which is pretty cool. And he has now access to that portal with this configuration. So if I go into this, and this request is, and it has been reviewed, it has been already delivered this morning, so he is good to go. And as a result, if this particular user needs to go to that site, if I remember that URL, make it big here, make it visible to you guys. I think it's HTTPS obviously 8365 tst dot sharepoint.com /sites/common. What was that? can't remember. Hold on 1 second. Let me pick it up from there. Sites./all company. Okay. And here I can log in as from the another Active Directory, right? Azure Active Directory. See, remember that one of the important part is that we have not added these identities into our Azure Active Directory. They're not even as a guest. They're completely outside your Azure Active Directory, right? They're coming from a different Azure Active Directory. And it will take me to my ADFS single sign-on page. And if they have the MFA turned on their side, it would also turn on the MFA. And voila, and this guy got an access to the environment. It is using that internal sponsor and external sponsor account, right? So it's using internal sponsor account as a kind of a impersonation here, and you see that this guy has gotten access to this environment. Beautiful, right? So it adds value, and if you have got your customers and vendors that they need to access your SharePoint site without adding them as a guest user or as an external user in your environment, you could do that. You could have multiple apps that you have published in your Azure environment or Azure tenant. You could do that. You could even allow the Azure resources there. That would be a little harder to do that, but you could still do that, right? So pretty cool stuff in my viewpoint. And so we have covered access packages now, and we understand what the access packages are. Basically, access packages allow you a self-service RBAC model. In this case, what we have showed you that you could have the Azure Active Directory groups created in advance, and they have been assigned the proper RBAC roles on the resources appropriately, and then you can publish those groups through access package with all the approval process behind it. And once you do that, you have the two options. Either you can allow the members to be requested. The requester could be added as a member to that group, or requester could be added as the owner to that group. Either way, once you do that, once they request it, you get to the approval process, you approve it, and they're automatically added either to the group as a member, or they have made as an owner of that group. So then they are able to do the task that that particular group has been assigned. Similarly, we have also shown you that you can have the connected organizations. If you have got another Azure Active Directory partners, vendors, your own, you have got a development environment and running in a different tenant, you could also bring them there and allow those users to be accessing your services in your Azure tenant or your O360 SharePoint Online, something, right? Pretty cool stuff. I think this is where I think we can conclude this particular video number 5. I know that this has been long for you guys. If you have been watching all 5 videos, we have come a long way, folks, and I'm sure, at least I hope, that you guys have liked it. You guys have found it valuable. You guys have found information pretty rich, and it is going to help you in whatever field you are and whatever you are doing. And as I mentioned in my last video too, I don't do it for any money. And if you think that this helped you, please do share with your colleagues so that they can also get benefited, right? With that, I would once again like to thank you all for your patient watching, patient viewing all these long videos. And you will only watch if you are interested to learn, right? That's the point. So I really appreciate your time here. Thank you very much, and have a great day or great night or great evening in whatever and whichever part of the world you are. Stay safe, stay away from COVID, and be healthy. And we'll talk in our last video, which is going to be around identity security, right? Thank you again. Goodbye.